What's up, everyone? Welcome to Sir Hunt's podcast. My name's Mark. In this video, I am joined by the lovely and wonderful In Deep Geek. We're going to be discussing Valyrian Steel, where it comes from, how we think it's made, and where it may go playing into Game of Thrones Season 8. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you at, Robert?
Hey Mark, it's great to be here. It's a fantastic channel you've got on here. My name is Robert from In Deep Geek. If you want to find me, my channel is In Deep Geek, and I do insight and detailed breakdown of Game of Thrones, Westworld, and more. So check me out on YouTube or all the other places people are on.
All right, awesome. Before we get started, and because you guys are so freaking amazing, I'm actually having a giveaway where you can win a $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be selected in 2 days on March 13th. All you have to do to enter this contest is make sure you slap a like on this video, which the like goal will be 420. Also, make sure you leave a comment down below. Go ahead and subscribe. Then turn your notifications on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Also, check out the gleam.io link pinned in the top comment of this video to enter all the different bonus ways. Alright, so first off, I'm going to have Robert cover a little bit on the history of how Valyrian Steel was actually forged.
Okay, so Valyrian Steel comes originally from the Valyrian Freehold. This was it was a metal which was forged by the Valyrians. The Targaryens, of course, are the last major Valyrian family, and the exact secrets of how it was made are now lost. So we don't know exactly how it was made, but what we do know is that it creates these incredibly strong, incredibly light, and incredibly sharp weapons, so they became incredibly sought after by the people in Westeros because obviously if you could get hold of one of these, then that gave you a great advantage. Now, one of the other things that we know about this is the way that it looks, which is slightly different to normal steel. It's got a slightly rippled pattern in it, and it's a slightly darker color as well, almost a blackish color, although it can be tinted into other colors. Now, obviously, for our story right now, the main thing that we need to know is that Valyrian Steel is one of only two things that we know of that can kill White Walkers and the Whites. So we're in a situation where the knowledge of how to make them has been lost, but we still have quite a few of these swords out in circulation. Last time anyone ever tried to count however many there were, they came up to a number just over 200 in Westeros, and these are almost all held by the biggest and mightiest families in Westeros.
All right, and that's a good point that you mentioned that there's almost 200 of them. In the TV show, I feel like there should be that many, but you know, I think they've cut certain situations. Like a lot of people think, and I'm going way off track here, that will probably happen a few times throughout this video. But the Night's King is not the Night King, that kind of thing, that kind of situation. So I feel like the Valyrian swords, there are that many of them, just not for the TV show. There's only a few. Like some of the ones that we know to recognize are like Heartsbane, Ice, Oathkeeper, some of those other ones. But I think that importance of it is made more so prevalent on the TV show because it's more like a dire situation. In the novels, I feel like since there's so many different Valyrian Steel swords, anyone can show up with anyone at any time and just be like, hey, this can be used to kill White Walkers. But on the show, they made a point to let us know, the just regular show watcher, that there's only a few of these swords in existence. So the people that have them are going to play important roles going into this endgame. Like with Brienne having one, with Jaime having one, with Jon Snow having one, we know they're all going to play a role in killing some White Walkers. I honestly think that the dagger that Arya is carrying right now is probably going to be used to kill many different White Walkers. I feel like there are warriors who are less skilled than Arya that have killed more so. Now, I'm not saying Jon's not as good as a warrior as Arya, but I feel like if they 1v1'd each other, you know, sort of like how her and Brienne did, Jon Snow would have his, yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that, man? I know it's kind of off topic, but even Arya versus Jon, who do you think would win in that showdown?
Dive straight in with the hard questions. I think Arya. Out of the two of them, I mean, Jon seems like a good warrior, but with Arya, it's all about the speed, and it's a fun game to do if you ever get really bored. Is go back through all the old fights we've had in Game of Thrones, matchups between two people, and see who who can take on who. And what we've seen is that Brienne is someone who has managed to stand her ground or defeat all of the biggest and most impressive fighters in Game of Thrones, like the Hound and Jaime. And yes, there were different circumstances there. But when she was sparring against Arya, Arya was holding her ground. So I think we can definitely say Arya is one of the finest fighters in all of Westeros.
That's true. Adding on to that point, what you said about Brienne has fought Renly. So not to say that I mean, you know, in the novels, Renly's this badass dude. He's very well equipped when it comes to the combat skills. And, you know, Brienne's fought just about almost everyone at all these different skill levels. And then with Arya sparring with her, you feel like Arya can hold her own against all of them as well. I honestly don't think that Arya and Jon will ever fight. But if they did, Arya would take him down. I'm glad we agree on that. As far as the actual forging of Valyrian steel, now the secret of it, and I'm actually reading partly verbatim, partly not verbatim, my own words from GameOfThrones.wikia.com, and that's actually linked down below in the description. You can click that link and go and read this article directly for yourself. But the secret of forging Valyrian steel was lost in the actual Doom of Valyria, like Robert had mentioned. After which, creating new Valyrian steel weapons was virtually impossible. The material was way too expensive, and Valyrian steel swords such as House Stork. Oh wow, yeah, that's one of the top houses in Westeros. House Stark's sword Ice were already valued heirlooms passed down from one generation to the next in powerful noble families. So I think it's safe to say that House Stark's only Valyrian steel sword is Ice, and it's, you know, because it's the rarity of it, it's become this family heirloom. A lot of people think that Ice, or not a lot of people, but just people who watch the show and don't really look that much into the novels, they think that Ice is actually going to be used, like, or it was actually used, like, during Robert's Rebellion or whatever. I had a few people asking me that question when I was doing the Robert's Rebellion video, and I did an in-game theories video where I was talking about how Jaime and Brienne both have, you know, these two halves to Ice, and it could be reforged, and a lot of people were commenting, and it made me think about it. Like, it's not practical to use it in battle, and traditionally it was for ceremonial use. Like, we saw Ned Stark use it to behead someone. He would never ride into combat and like, hey, let me take this. It's not anime, you know what I mean? But yeah, so going along with that, I kind of feel like we already know the secrets to a little bit of how Valyrian steel was formed, just for the simple fact that it was used these super expensive materials, and that only skilled blacksmiths can reforge Valyrian steel swords by melting, you know, old ones into new ones. And even doing that small thing, that's still a majorly difficult process, and that's why, if you remember, Tywin, didn't he have Tobo Mott reforge it? And he's one of like the best Westeros, or the best blacksmith inside King's Landing, if I'm not mistaken. One of the things that I think was used, and we're just going to kind of jump from here, explaining our different, you know, kind of theories of how it was made, but I honestly feel like it was definitely used dragons. Like, dragons were the key secret to that, just because we know that they were so prevalent in the Valyrian freehold. We know that some of the materials that were used for it, of course, were rare, but the main ingredient, I think, is dragons. You have to have something that's able to get extremely high temperatures, and dragons are capable of doing so. Not to mention, one of the few pictures, and I'm actually going to throw this up for you guys right now. In this picture, you can see that there's clearly a dragon breathing what looks like liquid flame into this forging, into this forging process. Then there's also like a blacksmith who seems to be like hammering at something. But I honestly feel like the main secret is dragon flame, but also Dragonglass. We do know that Dragonglass, if you get it hot enough, it can be used as the carbon to bond to iron to make it into that necessary steel. But I'm going to toss this off to you, Robert. What do you think the major secrets to making Valyrian steel are?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think you've covered off quite a lot there. I think for me,
Sorry.
Not a problem. I think for me, if this is magical, and it is magical, George R. R. Martin has called it magical steel, then there has to be an element of magic to it. And what we know about Valyrian magic, it's all to do with fire and blood. So I think fire and blood will definitely be involved in this process. I could see dragons providing the heat. I think obviously when you're forging steel, then you've got to have a lot of heat, so I could certainly imagine that they might use dragons there. But I think the key thing, as you said, is dragonglass. Now I think we've got two clues here to show why, or possibly three, why this is probably the case. The first is in the books when they were when Sam and John were discussing weapons for possibly killing White Walkers, they come across Dragon Steel, which sounds suspiciously like Valyrian Steel, as it comes from the land of the dragons. So that's the first one. The second one was the color. It's darker than usual steel, which seems to imply it needs to have had some sort of dark substance put into it, which could well have been Dragonglass. And then the third one, and I think for me the critical one, is the fact that this can kill White Walkers. Now, there's a great bit in, I think it was season 6 in Hard Home, when John is fighting against the White Walker and he kills the White Walker, and you can see when he first blocks the attack from the White Walker, there's a look of shock on that White Walker's face. And that look of shock, and I don't know whether or not, Mark, you can get the picture up here afterwards.
Oh, yeah, it's up there.
Fantastic. So that, for me, says that they did not realize that there were swords that could do that. They thought their only thing that could get them was Dragonglass. So, given the fact that the Valyrian Empire, the Valyrian Freehold, happened after the last long night, all of that technology has happened after the White Walkers were last on the scene. So this is why it's an incredibly important weapon, because they did not before realize that there were such things as swords that could destroy them.
Yeah, I think in the days of old, or maybe obviously you have the parallels of ice magic, fire magic. Valyrian steel is part of that fire magic. But when you were talking about the smelting process of like the forging process, you mentioned that Targaryens and Valyrians, Targaryen house words are fire and blood, and Valyrian dragon lords, fire and blood, all that good stuff in old Valyria. What if it's not an actual blood that needs to be, what if like king's blood has to be used in this forging process? Like, what if that's what helps give it that dark color along with the dragonglass? I honestly theorize that dragonglass, we do know, is like obsidian, which is like crystallized volcanic glass, I guess, for lack of better words. But I feel like, since this is a fantasy story, that can literally be used as frozen fire, aka dragon's blood. So you do have that blood being used in the forging process of Valyrian steel, just not from the traditional, king's blood. It's more from dragon's blood. We do know the dragon seed are royal, their spawn, or their, dragon spawn, Targaryen babes, that lineage. The royal blood's all there. But yeah, that would be interesting if because I'm like looking at this picture more so. I'll put it up again for you guys. But when it almost looks like the dragon is dead. It's just like someone holding its mouth down. I don't think that they were killing dragons to do this. No, but I feel like there might have been some not so savory ways into making this steel, and one of those might have been having to maybe put a small amount of blood into from a dragon into this process. But yeah, so just to kind of summarize what I was saying there, is basically one of the secrets might not be a savory secret. Like, there might be some dark history to it. Robert, where do you see some of these swords that we have on the TV show, some of these Valyrian steel swords, where do you see them being used going into this final season?
Yeah, I think there's a few different swords that will have quite clear roles. Now, I think shall we start with the two swords that came from ice? Ice being the huge ceremonial sword for the Stark family. Now, this got broken down into two: Oathkeeper, which was given to Jaime. He then gave it to Brienne. And Widow's Wail, which was given to Joffrey, and then eventually that one's come back around to Jaime. So for me, the character arc of these swords is that they are going to come back to be used in service to the Starks, as Ned Stark would have wanted. Ice serving the Starks. We've already got it with Oathkeeper, with Brienne. She's there protecting Sansa, and I could certainly see that Widow's Wail, and to be honest, they might even rename that. I don't know. I wouldn't want to keep a name that Joffrey gave it, but with that, I think that will also come and be there in service of the Starks in the north. So I think that whatever happened there with Tywin trying to make these Lannister family swords, I think they will end up regardless serving in the north, and actually as part of this battle against the White Walkers.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen. That would be like a giant, and we do know that history repeating itself rather is a very common theme, not only in the novelization of this great TV show, but in the TV show itself. There's certain things that always come back around, like whether it's famous lines delivered from one character and another character who have never met, or whether it's actual like kind of like similar themes to stories or lessons that the show's trying to teach us. It's all cyclical by nature, cyclical, I guess. I don't know. Either way, I honestly feel like, and I kind of want to shift focus from Ned Stark's swords, or I guess House Stark's swords that are coming back into their possession, which I honestly think that Jaime offering up that sword, that would be a pretty decent way to get back in good with House Stark. But I've actually done a video on my predictions for Jaime Lannister, as well as my predictions for Ice, or the two halves of Ice, Oathkeeper, and Widow's Wail. Those are actually linked down below in the description. You can go check those out and watch those. Come back and watch this. Let me know what you think. But I honestly think one of the most important Valyrian Steel weapons, not necessarily just swords, but just weapons in general, is going to be Arya's dagger. That dagger not only is mysterious of nature, excuse me, we don't know where it actually comes from, but it's also like because it's a dagger, it's a lot smaller than a weapon that was longer than that, and it maybe could, I don't want to necessarily say it because it triggers people, but this very well could be Dark Sister. We do know that the pattern that was on Dark Sister's hilt looks very similar to this wave pattern that's on the cat's paw dagger, as you can see right here. But the main importance of this is that it's got, and I think we should talk about this too, Robert, the different colors of Dragonglass, because that was something that I wasn't really aware of until I went back and researched. Like I kind of, I guess, just skimmed over it, or not necessarily skimmed over it, because a lot of the novels I listen to, I don't even really I know I'm lazy, but I don't really read them. I like to listen to them. I like Roy Dotrice's voice, but anyway, I kind of glazed over that. There's a lot of the Dragonglass is different colors, and the Dragonglass on this cat's paw dagger is a red Dragonglass. I honestly theorize that yes, obsidian is I guess, for lack of better words, like crystallized volcanic fire. But in a Fantasyland TV show, and I kind of was just getting on this, is that it could be frozen fire. It could literally be this dagger that Arya possesses could be a dagger of ice and fire, pseudo, ice, because it's, I guess, somewhat you can consider the frozen ice, the iron part. Whoa. I'm getting tongue twisted. I'm going to pass this off to you, Robert. Do you think that there's a possibility that this dagger that Arya carries is literally a dagger of ice and fire? Do you think there's any validity or any, substance to that?
Well, I think it is in as much as on the show you can see the design. It actually looks like it'd be used both ways. You could use it with the blade or the hilt. You could use that to be attacking as well. So yes, there's a sort of a thematic quality to that being both ice and fire. For me, I find that blade absolutely fascinating because it is completely anonymous. We have no idea where this comes from. Peter Baelish had it, and you would have thought if he had had a weapon that was incredibly valuable and is the kind of thing that all great houses have, he would have made a song and dance about this. This would suddenly be his weapon, his house weapon, in the same way that all these other houses had their house weapon passed down from father to son or whatever. But he didn't. He kept it secret. So for me, I find this absolutely fascinating that we do not know where this has come from, and we do not know if there's anything special about it. And I actually am okay with that. I'm okay with it being this kind of mystery thing. It kind of fits in with Arya, who has this backstory of who is she, what is her identity, we don't know. And so it fits for me that the character who's got this greatest issue of identity has also got the weapon with this greatest issue of identity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some significance to it, and everything that you said was perfect. So I don't really have anything to add on to that. But I will say that it was put in these early promo photos before Game of Thrones season 7 ever came out. The showrunners knew that we would immediately focus on this dagger that Arya's wearing in these pictures, and it just seems all too good. Like they're like, haha, we're gonna pull some like super spy type shit and drop an image with Arya holding this dagger. This dagger is the key to killing the Night King. Let's just put it on Arya, who's the most badass. Honestly, I feel like between Arya and Jon, they're probably the two most fan favorite, not only for everyone watching, but also for Dan and Dave. They have the most well-written scenes. Jon Snow has never been in a scene where I'm like, oh my god, this is insufferable, I can't wait for it to end. Where there's been many other characters who have been in scenes like that, where I'm like, okay, this is like a little bit too long, or this is just not necessary. But I've never been like that with Arya or Jon. So either way, I feel like Arya, just her significance and importance to the story, holding this cat's paw dagger, I feel like that's just a huge, I don't know, it's a huge climax to the story. She's going to use this dagger to kill the Night King. But a little bit more significance is we actually saw when Sam and Gilly were researching Valyrian Steel, or when they were just researching in general, we actually saw this dagger pictured on a freaking page. It was kind of glazed over a little bit, like we only saw the page for a split second, but it's pretty awesome that there actually is a record of this. Now, the hilt looks a little bit different in the sense that the cat's paw part of it isn't as prominent in the novels, or in that little picture that we're getting from the books, but it's kind of hard to tell what they were saying. But I honestly think this dagger might actually be Aegon the Conqueror's, and it actually, there's a line that I could make out, and it says that Targaryens or Valyrians used to put dragonglass on their weapons to sort of like adorn them in jewelry, and this one has the red dragonglass on it. But we do know that Aegon the Conqueror was somewhat of a legend. I'd say he's probably one of the most famous members of House Targaryen. I wouldn't be surprised if this dagger was lost to time, and then Rhaegar Targaryen, being this huge prophecy nut that he is, you know, like modern day we have like these health nuts, guys that are just working out all the time. This is how Rhaegar was with prophecy. He tried to fulfill it any chance he could get. So if that's the case, maybe he recovered this lost dagger from Aegon and put it in a place where it would maybe position itself to work its way into House Stark, or maybe to one of the descendants from his union with House Stark, that being with Jon Snow. The dagger got pretty freaking close. We know it was used to almost kill Bran. I was about to say, yo, it was used to kill Bran. You guys didn't realize that Bran's been dead since then anyway. And now Arya has it, and Arya is arguably one of Jon's closest family members. We do know, you know, they care about each other a lot, and I honestly think Arya is Jon's favorite. I think they mentioned that. But what do you think about that, man? I don't know. I have the picture up now. I don't know if you have it up on your end, but is there anything from this, like the little page, or is there anything, do you think there's any more significance to them putting it literally pictured in an ancient book that Sam is studying? Like, is that, you know, is there maybe something that we're not making out from this, that they're trying to literally hint at us that this needs to be used to replace that dragonglass that's inside the Night King's chest, maybe?
I think the short and slightly disappointing answer to this is no. I think that this is an ancient Valyrian dagger. I think that is why it's there. It didn't have a label on that page. Somebody has transcribed that, so perhaps we could put a link down in the description on that one. It's about the adornment, and the whole point of that page was to sort of show people, or to describe to people, as you said, that they often used dragonglass. So I think that was a hint to us that dragonglass is not just a thing Children of the Forest used, but this was a thing the Valyrians used. So I think this is another hint to where Valyrian steel comes from. I sort of hinted at it earlier, actually, but I think that it's worth reiterating that Valyrian steel is relatively recent. It's only a couple of thousand years old, maybe. As part of the Valyrian freehold, this was not around at the time of the first Long Night. So none of these weapons are specifically designed in order to take on White Walkers or to deal with the Night King.
Well, see, here's the thing with that, though, is we do know on this page right here, I can see it says dragonglass was too brittle to make weapons out of, so that's why they used it to adorn their weapons. But this is not necessarily the case, because we do know that in the Long Night, this isn't, weren't they using dragonglass tipped spears and stuff? Like, there's a way to fashion it into weapons, just not like a long dragonglass sword or something. We saw Jon and them use these dragonglass spears afterwards. So who's to say that Westeros, and this is like, slip on your tinfoil caps before I say this, or as I like to put up, you know, as a picture of a tinfoil cat wearing a hat. It's a cat in the hat with a tinfoil cap. There we go. But basically, what if Westeros didn't have some crude form of Valyrian steel? Like, who's to say the Children of the Forest didn't make some, you know, ancient old god version of this, and they combined dragonglass with maybe weirwood, and made this weirwood. Oh gosh, I'm going crazy here. But let's say they made this giant weirwood spear. The entire spear was made out of weirwood, and then it was dragonglass tipped. I honestly did a prediction, and I'll put a link to it. You can click right up here, and this will take you straight to this video. But I did a prediction on how to kill the Night King's dragon, and in order to do that, I took, from prophecy. Everyone likes using this, but it's basically in the novels. Bran has these visions of the Winterfell godswood, and in one of these visions, he sees a Stark sharpening a weirwood branches into an arrow, and a lot of us equate this to Torrhen Stark, the Stark who knelt. His brother Brandon Snow wanted to go and kill Aegon's dragons, so a lot of people think that there's a way to kill dragons using weirwood trees. So I honestly feel like that the Children of the Forest could have made these ancient weirwood spears, and these were used to destroy the White Walkers or the others from before. And this could also be used to kill the Night King's dragon. Like, let's say we do have Cersei having, and I know we're getting off of the Valyrian Steel path here, but not really, because Dragonglass is related to it. But we do know that Cersei has these giant ballistas, and she could totally strap a weirwood spear dragon tipped arrow on the top of that and fire it off. Maybe not Cersei herself, but maybe Jaime takes one. We do know that these things are mobile, so it's possible that some of the small group of Lannisters that he's able to convince to come and join him, one of them grabs the what are those things called? Carts? They're not carts, but the wagons. Maybe one of them grabs the wagon with it. What do you think about all that, Robert?
So on the ballista, I think absolutely that's the way that they're going to get to kill that ice dragon. I think that's a huge arrow with probably dragonglass end. I think that you're right with that thing from the reference in the book when Bran saw the vision through the tree of a character from long ago creating a weirwood arrow. So I think perhaps weirwood arrow with a dragonglass tip fired from one of those ballistas. Maybe Bronn can do it. Seems he's so good at this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm gonna let you get back on. But that's another thing too, is history repeats itself, and we literally just saw this happen to Drogon, except he didn't die.
Absolutely. So I think the only other thing I was going to say was that if you dig right back in the show history, we don't know if it's going to be the same in the books, but in the show history, the White Walkers were created by the Children of the Forest. And they created them to be this perfect weapon against humanity. And what they also did, they did that was they made them be invulnerable to humanity's weapons, as we've seen many times already. They made them so that they used humanity's numbers against them. So they raised the dead humans to fight against the humans. And they put in this little thing to protect themselves against the White Walkers running riot, which was that they made sure that they were vulnerable to what the Children of the Forest used as weapons, which was dragonglass. Because dragonglass was what they used as weapons. The humans used just sort of like iron and things like that. So there's that's where this difference comes, and that's why if you get as we were talking about earlier, why if you get dragonglass in a weapon, that is then able to kill the White Walker.
Nice. I like the way you pieced that together. That was beautiful, my dude.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, just to kind of, we're not necessarily wrapping it up right away, but just to kind of shoot towards down that path, I guess. Let's start talking about what we think was the actual chasm or the major event that destroyed Valyria. I honestly feel like it has to have something to do with Dragonglass. We do know that we had this massive tragedy at Summerhall that was a giant fire that I think the Maesters had a hand in, basically wanting to end dragons from Westeros, and we do know that Egg, I think, was fascinated by dragons. He was trying to bring them back into the world, and I think there might have been a Maester that might have dropped some wildfire in there and it all burned down. But I think something very similar to that happened with the Valyrians. I feel like there was this subplot going through the city, and I would love to find out more about it when George drops Fire and Blood. I can't freaking wait, but I feel like there might have been this subplot going on to destroy the city from the inside out. We do know that the Valyrians and their Dragon Lords ruled any sort of society they came across. We do know that they are massive conquerors. Their most common historical counterpart, arguably, I guess, would be the Roman Empire. They were all about conquering and expanding territory. So it would only make sense that someone would work to destroy them from the inside out. That means wiping out all the Valyrians, all of the dragon lords that are there, all the dragons that are around Valyria, and just taking them off the face of the map. And if you look at it, when we see it on the TV show and the way it's described in the novels, it's clearly there was a giant explosion. Robert, what do you think happened? Do you think there was like some secret subplot to destroy itself?
Absolutely. I don't think this was a subplot. I think this was a massive, massive conspiracy. If you do check out my channel, In Deep Geek, you'll find that there's a playlist there called Magic, Maesters, and the Faceless Men. And as part of that, I go through in a few different videos, I go through my theory about what caused the Doom of Valyria. But at a sort of a basic level, Valyria was built on 14 volcanoes. Now, the most obvious reason for there to be this huge explosion was for these volcanoes to erupt. And what we know is that the Valyrians had magic users who were constantly stopping that happening. So in terms of the actual mechanism for how this happened, it's to me reasonably clear that somebody killed these magic users, and that in turn allowed all the volcanoes to erupt. Sorry, hang on one moment. Could you just edit that bit out? I just had to burp.
If you want me to, I'll edit it out. But if not, I'll leave it in because it was really funny. I was enjoying that.
You can put it in the outtakes later. But I'll just finish off the thought. So somebody killed these magic users. Now, the other thing we know, just to tie this in, is where the Faceless Men come from. The Faceless Men are assassins, the ideal people to be able to sneak in and kill people who are not supposed to be able to be killed. And they came from the mines underneath Valyria. That is where that started. So my theory is that the Faceless Men, and there's some hints in the books about this, the Faceless Men did this. And the question then is, who paid them to do this? Who wanted them to do this? And that I'm going to tease you by saying, go and have a look at the videos on my site, because I think that there's a very good reason why the Maesters and bizarrely House Lannister are involved in this.
Well, just from what you said right there, I'm going to make my guess, take my crack at it, if you will. And I honestly feel like that they did it for themselves, to free themselves. They were slave miners from underneath the city. And we do know that the Faceless Men work on that Braavosi tradition of, like, you know, I guess it's similar to the Ironborn of like paying the iron price or whatever. Maybe they did that with themselves. Maybe the first Faceless Men became no one and traded in I don't know. I just rough guess. I feel like they did it to just free themselves from the situation they were in. We do know that George is a big fan about slaves rising up to, you know, oppress the masters instead of being oppressed by the masters. So that could be a common theme with that. But yeah, go check out Robert's video on that. I've actually linked down below in the description his channel, so make sure you go do that and subscribe. And then also go and comment on his video. Spam his comment section and tell him House Hunts sends their regards. But as far as the secret to Valyrian Steel, I kind of feel like we covered most of it in this video, a little bit on the back history of it as well, and how we both think that it was made. Robert, was there anything else that you wanted to add is there anything else that you wanted to add on to this discussion that you think needs to be said about either Valyrian Steel, Dragonglass, the secret of how Valyria was destroyed, or anything like that?
I think the only thing I would add is that there are a lot of swords that are huge and legendary in the books that haven't really made it across to the show. Now, I think it's probably too late. We said it's probably too late to introduce them individually, but I think it's probably fair to say that there's a good chance that the Golden Company, who's coming across, they may well own one of them. There's a fair chance that Bloodraven, the Three-Eyed Raven, he had one of them, and you might well have seen Mira picked up a sword on her way out of the cave. So there are a lot of these swords that are just floating around that could make their way up north. We've got as well as the ones we've already talked about, we've got Longclaw, of course, and we've got Heartsbane, which was the sword that Sam has brought up there. So there's a lot of them. So actually, we're moving from a position where only Longclaw and John can kill White Walkers to a position actually where we can have a group of people who can all do it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing too, and a lot of people were saying that was the main reason of showing Sam including or stealing Heartsbane, because we know Sam's not a fighter. Like who's gonna wield it. That's interesting that you said that. You made me think, like, almost every single person who's a strong and capable fighter, someone who could hold their own against a White Walker, because we know they toss most dudes aside like it's nothing. They've got super strength. It's never been officially stated, but it's clear they are stronger than actual men, for the TV show at least. But I feel like every single one of those characters has now, after season 7, now has this Valyrian steel weapon with him. You have Arya with his dagger. Only thing she's missing is like a short sword, basically like what Jon Snow's bastard sword is. Jon Snow has one. The only one who doesn't, Brienne, Jaime, the only one who doesn't right now is Sandor. So I feel like Sandor wielding Heartsbane is perfect. What do you think about the idea? And I feel like we need to mention this because it wouldn't be a Valyrian Steel video without bringing it up at least once. What do you think about, you know how we have Euron's Valyrian Steel suit of armor? What do you think about Jon Snow having that? I actually did a video, and it's linked down below in the description. It's called The Jon Snow Theory Everyone Missed. But there's a novel. Yeah, there's a book on Jon Snow. There's a part in The Dance with Dragons where Jon is remembering, or he's having a dream, sorry, and he's on top of the wall, and he looks at himself, and I don't have it right in front of me right now, but basically the way that he's described, it almost sounds like he's wearing a suit of Dragonglass armor, and he's like slaying all these whites and people that he knows are White Walkers, and he's killing them, and they're just like falling down the wall, and Jon is like, you know, just on top of the wall fighting them. It's this major, insane, awesome imagery that we get that goes along with this. But what do you think about the ideal of maybe some partial Valyrian steel armor? Like, let's say, how do you feel about Jon Snow getting a Valyrian steel like chest plate with the House Stark emblem on it? Like, obviously it would have to be Targaryen. And that's another thing too. Do you think there's any like secret Targaryen armor maybe down in the crypts? Like, those are the last 2 questions we'll close out on.
Okay, so I think the idea of Jon having Valyrian steel armor, I think, is really cool. But in the show, they've just not led in with this at all. So I can't actually see that happening. We've only got 6 more episodes, so I can't see it happening. In the books, yeah, absolutely. Euron's got this Valyrian steel armor, and so there's, I think, the first thought that comes across anyone's mind was, how useful would that be at the wall? So that's there. There's also, I think, in terms of other stuff hanging around, again, what was in the books, but they didn't quite include in the show, was when Euron was at the King's Moot. He showed people all these treasures that he's brought back, and it just skims past it that there was a whole load of Valyrian steel daggers that he'd brought back. So on the Iron Islands, there's a whole load of Valyrian steel weapons just waiting. So yes, it's possible, but I think right now, actually, it's still so rare that I think that taking a sword and beating it down into armor is actually not going to be the issue. I think that will take a long time. I think they will just use what they've got. And as we've said, we've already got a squad of people at the wall. We've got Jon, we've got Arya, we've got Jaime, we've got Brienne, we've got potentially Sandor if he takes Heartsbane. We've got a lot of people. The battles we see in the future are not going to be the same kinds of battles, the massacres that we saw in the past, because it's going to be 2 sides who can both take each other out.
Yep, and I think the main thing to that, and the point that I was kind of missing, is maybe not necessarily taking an existing Valyrian steel sword, but just coming up with a recipe to it, because we do know that Sam has those books with him, and I feel like Jon Snow's lineage, how they kill the Night King, all of that is wrapped up in those novels. The same with the secret to Valyrian steel. We've already got all of those secret ingredients present. If there's some sort of sacrifice that have to be involved, maybe not, but we have dragons, we have Dragonglass, we also have a ready version of iron. And we have a very skilled blacksmith. So I honestly feel like someone is going to be getting either a V steel helmet, possibly some greaves. I think it would be awesome if someone fashioned a small Valyrian steel dagger for Jaime to fit over his non-hand hand, and maybe even some Valyrian steel fingertips for the boy Davos. But I feel like that's a good, unless you had something that you wanted to add in real quick, I feel like that's a good wrapping up point. Do you want to share your thoughts on that? Maybe on the secret of the recipe being found, and maybe Gendry doing something with that?
Yeah. I think it's they've lined everything up for this to happen. We've got Sam who's come up with books. If anywhere knows about the secret recipe, it's going to be the Citadel, because we know that they do manipulate it, because the maesters who study magic get a Valyrian Steel link in their chain. So we know that they know at least how to manipulate it once it's there. So if anyone knows, it's going to be them. And as you say, we got you have to put what's his name?
Gendry?
Yeah.
You had me at a loss. I was like, what?
Okay, sorry, I'll just start that one again. And we have got Gendry, who studied under Tobbo Mott, who was the best blacksmith in the entirety of King's Landing, and he was the one who managed to reforge ice into those swords. So if anyone knows how to do it, it will be Gendry. So yeah, it's entirely possible. Whether or not we've got enough time in the show to get through all this, I've absolutely no idea. But yeah, it's very doable. And Davos with new Valyrian steel fingers, love it.
Just imagine him. He's like, never been much of a fighter, but I didn't say anything about running past these White Walkers and touching them. Like, that would be so funny. Oh my god. All right, so that's a good point to wrap this video up. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video. The like goal is 420. Also, if you want to be entered in my contest to win this $100 Amazon gift card, all you have to do, slap a like on this video, subscribe, turn your notifications on, then check out the gleam.io link pinned in the top comment of this video. I want to thank my guest Robert so freaking much for coming on this show. And Robert, why don't you tell everyone where we can all find you at, bro?
Absolutely. I am In Deep Geek on YouTube. So come and have a look if you're after insight, intelligent debate about Game of Thrones and Westworld. We're coming out to Westworld Season 2. Game of Thrones and Westworld, In Deep Geek on YouTube.
All right, awesome. And as well, there are links to his Twitter and his YouTube channel down below in the description. I want to give a super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family, especially to Terry. Without every single one of you guys' love and support, I would not be able to make these kinds of videos. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name's Mark. This has been Mark and In Deep Geek. I want to thank you all so much for watching. This has been Sir Hunt's Reviews. You guys are probably wondering what the secret Easter egg is going to be in a video where I'm collabing with someone else, but Robert doesn't know this. I'm actually his father.
That's where I get my good looks from.
All right, y'all. Thank you for watching.